Ya'ate, hello. Welcome to Real Native Roots, Untold Stories, a podcast by a Native woman with deep roots. Hosted by yours truly, Vicky Katsuli Boy Oldman. I am a lover of stories, a connector, and a holder of wisdom keepers. Each month, we will be connecting with our Native relatives and exploring what medicine our guests share and offer to us. Please join me on this uncharted journey to learn, connect, and reflect. Ahé'hee. Thank you. Hello, everyone. How you doing? It's been a podcast day, and I am in a good place. One thing I wanted to offer you all that may be helpful to you and whoever's living with you, maybe your parent or your child or your partner, whoever you're living with, to check in with each other. I feel like sometimes we don't do that enough. My household is an intergenerational household. My partner likes to check in usually in the morning. Our check in usually consists of how are you mentally? How are you emotionally? How are you physically? And how are you spiritually? And then he always asks, and what are you grateful for? And we've been making this a practice. And I appreciate it when I'm telling him mentally, I'm all over the place. And then he'll get curious, like, well, tell me more about that. And I'm like, wow, I got a lot. I'm worried about mom and I got work. And what I find that when we're doing that, I feel like we have a little bit more grace and compassion for each other. Like I'm a little bit more understanding. So I think for him, it's like, okay, she's not really focused. And I understand why. I find that it has helped with understanding each other. So then there's no assumptions being made. Anyway, you know how I always like to check in. And I thought this would be something to share with you all. And I'm really enjoying that. I've been using it sometimes with work when I check in with clients and, asking not all of them, but I'll say, what are you grateful for? And how are you doing emotionally? And it's funny when I ask the emotion question, what do you think the common answer is? People are like, I'm good. And I'm like, is good a feeling? Right? Are you happy? Are you elated? Anyway, it's been great. So my friend here, he's actually another podcaster. So Juan, his podcast is called Burn the Wagon. I started following him, I think during COVID or like 3 years ago, something like that. It was actually a friend of mine. Her name is Melanie Drewberry. And she says, you got to check out this little cutie, is what she said. And she sent me his link. He comes on the week, I think Fridays, and brings guests from all over, Native storytellers, people who are activists, artists, and getting their story as well. And his message really is about making sure we know the history for us to tell our own narratives, really for us to be at the table and be vocal about what's important, which I think is beautiful. And he works in a nonprofit and he does community work. I know that he's really involved in his culture and his community is important to him. I am just so honored to have you here so we can learn a little bit about who you are and what you're hoping for. And yeah, we'll just chit chat. So please bring your voice in and say hello to our listeners.
Sinwama, Yahui Yakape, Yahui Kanimachidu. I said, how are you? And thank you to our creator and thank you to our blessings. Because today is a blessing to be here on this podcast and having a conversation with you. I also want to say, send love to my Aunt Lorraine and Lisa Elgin, who recently passed away. Sending love to them. And they're two cultural bearers that we lost in our community. So I think it's very important that we give them love and show their name some love and make sure that they're hearing us from the other side and make sure that we're not ever going to forget about them. And yeah, also want to send love to anybody out there suffering from domestic violence issues, mental health issues, unhoused situations. I want to send love to anybody that's listening in the future. I want to send love to our Palestinian relatives, our relatives in the Congo, our relatives wherever they're suffering from that colonized mindset coming in and taking out the indigenous people of those lands, because that's what Burn the Wagon is all about. wherever people have suffered from wagons coming in and opposing their views, their lifestyles onto people. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to tell the stories, you know. Yeah. And I'm sure you got some questions lined up, but that's a little bit of the intro about myself.
I love it. Thank you. I know I've seen a couple of videos. Would you say you're like a rapper?
I'd say more of a poet. I've
Like,
tried to
well, you
rap. Yeah, I've tried to rap, but my brain sometimes can't keep up with the beat. So I kind of just goes freestyle poetry, a cappella, I guess. It's in between because people have said you do like I do like a spoken word rap style.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit in between.
Well, if you don't mind, I would love for you to read one of the poems that you sent. Usually, I always read a poem, talk a little bit about it, and you're a poet. I'd rather have people hear the beautiful words that you put down on paper. And I would love for you to read it versus me because yeah, I just think it just make it come more alive.
Absolutely, and there's a little story behind that too, because I was just gonna post like the words of it in a caption, right? And my friend was like, you know, like I don't think people would grasp it as much as you saying it.
Yeah.
So like, it's for sure. I completely understand, and I'm absolutely down to go ahead and say one of those. I definitely know which one I'm going to say, but yeah, I'll
Right.
just go ahead and get started. I'm from a place where there's more broken bottles than put together dreams. He seems tough on the outside, but inside he's running from the roller coaster of his fears. He held in his tears for years because it was put inside his head that the red nations never taught. It's probably because the spirits walk with the weight of a stolen world on their shoulders. Colonizers with their holsters empty on sight, but the light of the moon keeps us warriors in tune with precious Mother Earth. But Father Time brings different swords of men with blood dripping from the end. And I'm tired of it being our blood dripping from the end.
I love it. Thank you. There's so much in there. Where were you at? Like, what place were you in when you wrote this?
There's a couple lines that I wrote when I was like 21 or 20, or it had to been like 22. And like threw it in some random like verse that just didn't fit, right? And then years later, I'm kind of just writing, starting like this whole poem has been bits and pieces written over like 6, 7 years. And just like it just kept, adding on and adding on. And I was towards the end, and I was like, oh, you know what's gonna fit perfectly in that? That random line that I had in a verse a while back, and it just made everything just like perfect. I think it was the walks with the weight of a stolen world on their shoulders verse, and our line, and I kind of like tweaked it around a little bit, moved words around, and then made it fit. So I was living in Santa Cruz at the time when I majority of that was written.
I love poems. I told folks on the podcast that I really never was one to read a lot of poems. Then when I started this podcast journey, I started to read. Oh well, this guy that got me because of my. Can you see that?
Yeah, Richard Wagum. I don't know want to pronounce that last name. Mispronounce it.
Yeah.
Comes from spirit. Yeah.
So I'm always reading his stuff. And the other poet that I've been reading is at least because of my
Yeah.
anyway, it's Young Pueblo.
Oh, okay.
I started reading them and then I just really fell in love with poetry. I'm like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And it just inspired me. And then it inspired me to do more journaling. And then anyway, I started incorporating it into the podcast. And I read from people of color, try to find indigenous poets to read from and have others be aware of how many beautiful writers and artists that we have out there.
Have you heard of Cliff Taylor?
No.
He's a he goes by Ponka, the Ponka poet, Cliff Ponka. I can send you his Instagram, but he's an amazing native poet, and I had the pleasure of having him on my and amazing.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you guys probably get to talk all day because it's your thing.
I have to get one of his books because he just released a book, a poetry book. Yeah, poetry, I was always afraid to pursue it because for some reason on the res, there's giant amounts of toxic masculinity. And for some reason, poetry to me was connected to femininity. And I never wanted to express that. So for the longest time, like I was a very like afraid to express myself because expressing yourself was connected to, for some reason, being put in my head, femininity. And that like kind of go plays into that line. What was it? Tears in for years or something like that. Because it was put inside my head that the Red Nations never taught. And for a long time, I thought that I had to be, how Native men are stoic, you know, so that was put in my head for a really long time, and then I got sober, and it's like, actually, you know what? I don't care. I'm gonna express myself, and then that's when all of this started happening. I started meeting people like Melanie. I remember exactly how she pulled up to. I was working at the juice bar, and she came up just blinged up, just looking like I was like, I haven't seen a Native woman look like this in Santa Cruz ever. Like, I had to go up and, like, introduce myself and, like, ask where she was from and all that, because in Santa Cruz, that shit is rare. Like, oh, sorry, I don't know if I can cuss, but that is rare to see in Santa Cruz, that, like, a native person.
I love her. I love her so much. She's a amazing woman, and she actually was the woman who taught me how to say no. Like, I knew how to say no,
Yeah,
and it was in the context of, "No, can't do it." And then she'd tell me, "And don't apologize and don't say anything more. They don't need to know more. You just tell them, 'Can't do it.'" And that was so hard to do, and I've gotten so much better. I say it with love and compassion now, like, "No, I can't do it."
and that's been happening to me lately where people are just asking me to be at live events, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah," and then not remembering that I have, like, a job, that I have, like, all these things to do, but my job's super, like, open to me going to these events. I still have to check in and, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
like, is it okay I have the day off?" And just, like, I'm running into because I get excited because like, "Oh, people are, like, actually listening,"
Yeah,
people, like, want these,
of
like,
course.
yeah, exactly. So it's like I get really excited and don't like really think about how am I getting there, how like all those things. I just say,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll be there, So I need to learn how to say no too.
Yeah, we're all a work in progress. The other poem that you sent me, it's called Res Life. I'm just curious about what reservation you're from, what it was like to grow up on the res.
So I'm from the Manchester Point Arena Reservation. I'm not an enrolled member. I was adopted from the first day I was born by a Pomo Whapo woman, and her name's Leandra Oshie McGill.
Mhm.
And that's the only story that I know. That's the only way I was raised from the day of my birth was as a Pomo person in a Pomo community. So growing up on the res was I moved here when I was, I think, 8 or 9, and, like, it was pretty wild, pretty scary at times, but at the same time, like, the community that is here, like, they love you, that we love each other. We're a community where, yeah, we fight. At times, people get drunk and fight outside and do that thing. And there's definitely, like I said, toxic masculinity. There's a lot of things that we need to fix for sure. But at the same time, this is my community. This is the people that I love. This is the people that raised me. And the reason that I'm here doing this work is the two people I mentioned in the beginning. One of them worked with ICWA, and then the other one worked for Indian Health, making sure Native people have healthy lifestyles, making sure they get the healthcare that they need, and that's what we need, people like that. And they're too strong. They were two strong Native women. But if they didn't have that lead, I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I definitely have to like give thanks and give praise to the matriarchs of my community because the women here really run things. And that's who I learned from. My mom's a single mom that I learned everything from. Yeah, she had her struggles, she had her mental health situations that she was dealing with. And that's why now we try to learn together from those generational traumas that was put inside her because she grew up in a time she was born in 1950. So segregation wasn't illegal till what, 1968. So she lived in a time where there was segregated time. We live in a real rural community where the gold rush and the extraction of the redwood trees was huge here. So her and her family definitely dealt with that pushing out. She's seen that. She saw that in her lifetime. So dealing with that, and that's just one example of what happens on the res of one family on the res. Our whole res has to deal with that trauma. But what I will say is growing up in the res was also fun. But you don't have a lot, but you also have everything because you have smiles, you have those aunties laughs, you have everything. to keep make you feel loved is here. And that's the biggest thing is like when I'm at an event and or we're at Roundhouse or any type of ceremony, you hear those aunties laughs. That's almost like medicine, you know. So the fond memories of the res is just running around with my cousins, playing football, playing baseball, being outside constantly, fighting. And then the next day coming back, being best friends again. You know what I mean? So stuff like that, just pretty much being on that baseball field, on that football field, on that basketball court all the time, going out and picking blackberries. And I remember we used to get big Ziploc bags and throw them in there and then throw sugar in there and mash them up. And that was our snack for the day.
Ooh, that sounds
Yeah.
good.
Going off in the woods, making whatever tree house or whatever. We'd disappear for 2, 3 hours, 4 hours, half the day sometimes, just playing, just being kids. That's just memories. Going down to my grandpa's house, hanging out with him, watching cowboy movies. Watching
Thank
cowboy
you.
movies, even though John Wayne is racist as hell and controversial, but hanging out with my grandpa and just soaking in that time was beautiful.
What was a funny memory of grandpa?
Instead of saying "shut your mouth," 'cause, like, when he would like, we would be doing something stupid or saying something dumb, he used to say, "Shut your mouth." Like your mouth a mouse. A lot of times just like he would he was a crazy guy because it would be storming, raining, and he'd find any excuse to go out and work in the yard. Like, what are you doing? You're 80 years old and you're still out in the rain fixing the gutters or whatever. And when I would get in trouble, he'd be over there just laughing his ass off because he found it funny when I would get in trouble. And
You would get in trouble?
yeah, a lot as a kid. You'd be surprised. I was a little bad one. But yeah, that's just like super fun. Just like his laugh, seeing him laugh after you got in trouble, even though I was just sitting there just mad. But now looking back, it's just like his laugh was pretty funny.
Isn't that beautiful? Like when you say that, I can actually hear like when you describe the aunties, I could hear my aunties laughing. You talk about your grandpa, and even like their smell. Like when I think about my grandpa, there's a smell, a certain scent that he had. I can smell it when I think about him. It's amazing how much I feel like growing up, like all this, our senses, our body is like getting all this data. And in a moment's notice, like 30 years fast forward, you can remember. And it brings joy in your body.
Yeah, I walk into the and when you said that, like I have like clear, super clear memory of walking in his room and what his room looked like and his guns posted up because he liked to hunt, he liked to do all that. But yeah, and like when I walk into the front yard at the property where my uncle lives now, where our family property is, I have all that stuff. Like smelling the grass, smelling the he had hedges in front, like smelling like all that, seeing that, feeling that brings all those memories back. It was like to all the different type of cousins that came through that place. And I miss it because obviously we're all grown up, we have lives, everyone kind of moved away, everyone is busy with stuff and we don't get to check in all the time. And unfortunately, like I said, we had two people pass and we had their funerals and everyone came and everyone was laughing, everyone was happy. And it's like,
Yeah.
I wish we can have these moments without people having to pass. I wish people could just be closer in proximity in location and all of that. But obviously we all have lives. We'll have things going on that we can't just like kind of drop things. And with things being so expensive, a lot of people live in California out here. You can't just take a couple of days off of work because that means a couple of days off the paycheck. So
Right. I think about our communities, and one of the key elements that I know hearing and visiting different tribes across the country is relationship. We talk about connection, not just with each other, but with the land. The way the world is now and to survive is different. My oldest son, he always says, I just want to live off the grid. Like I want to have my own food and not even have to worry about technology. To really live like a self-sustained life is hard. The environment is an issue. We don't get as much rain as we used to. There's certain plants that don't grow anymore. We think about that lifestyle, and that lifestyle was actually hard. It was not easy, you know?
not and that's the thing too with like decolonizing, right? Because to fully decolonize, we would have to get rid of our phones, we'd have to get rid of our hot water, our running water. our toilets, all of that. So like I try to go to I'm decolonizing my mindset, and then maybe one day that can come along because to completely just live off the grid, man,
Yeah.
I love a hot shower. I'm not gonna lie. So like to go back to that lifestyle like we did, it would be extremely hard, and you just have to have a lot of people that are willing to do it because, like, right now, unless you know people that are willing to trade for things, but majority of things that you need, like lumber to build all that stuff, like, you need money. You need to, unfortunately, play into the capitalistic game that the world is right now.
True. When I have gone to like Seminole, Florida, and I've even been like in parts of Alaska, and I think about the time when it's really cold or really, really hot, and the animals and bugs that come along with that, it's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Was there was a point where when I was really young in college, I wished for that, like to be back in that time frame. As I got older, I realized, yeah, that was hard living. That wasn't easy.
yeah, and I don't think people are, like, truly understand how hard that living was. 'Cause you're having to do everything.
Mhm.
Find food, find water, and finding food isn't just, like, easy. You have to hike, you have to kill that whatever that animal is. It's not an easy life, and you have to harvest too, so that goes into play, and that type of lifestyle could be dangerous too if not people aren't, like, careful. I live in Mendocino County, and we're pretty close to, like, living off grid. I have some friends that are pretty close to off grid, and they
Uh,
do it, but it's tough.
yeah. I know. I grew up on the res with my grandparents on my dad's side. They had sheep, cattle, horses, and they planted. We had no running water, no electricity. But it because I knew how to do all of that and they had a large family, I as a young child, I just remember it was just fun. I didn't, but the older you get, the more responsibilities you have. So it was a little different. So I think I got grace because my grandmother was always protective of me. And so as she would say in Navajo, let her sleep in. Yeah.
How do you know how to say that in Navajo?
She would say something like, I want to say the word, "Ade," like that's enough. No, no way. Like, don't do that.
Uh,
A wet whoosh, let the baby sleep.
I love your guys' language so much. It sounds I mean, I love when people speak their language no matter where what tribe or even people in other countries speaking their language and when they,
Yeah.
like, pronounce it, oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool to me.
So my grandparents spoke Navajo all the time. They were not English users. They spoke fluent. And so I grew up hearing that and never was like 100% fluent, but I could speak enough to have conversation. And then when I went to college and didn't practice speaking, it faded. I still, though, like I'm around the elders a bit, I know what they're saying. I know what they're talking about. I can figure out what they're saying. And it's funny because you asked me that. I'm like, I can say bits of it. I can say it in my head. I know exactly what she said, but when it comes out, not that way. You know what I'm saying? You feel me?
Yeah, this happens a lot where I'll try to pronounce a word and my mom will "You're supposed to say it like this," and there's certain, like, ways you're supposed to do your throat, like, with guttural, like, noises. There's certain words that you're supposed to just, like, really say like, pronounce it, and I don't pronounce it enough for her.
You had mentioned earlier that Juan I said, you were naughty. So, what was Juan like in his formative years? I'm curious about that lifetime, that frame, and then how that has molded you to the man that you are today.
During high school, I was really angry. I was a really angry person
Mm.
because I don't think I was accepting, like, because my mom told me I was adopted at a very young age, and I don't think I accepted that very well, and I think it
Mm.
angered me a lot and pushed me towards, like, depression and, like, just mainly just depressed. So, like, I feel like in high school, I was pretty angry, but still, like, played basketball, did all those types of things, but, like, I think deep down, I was super depressed. and didn't really know how to deal with it. And with mental health is barely being talked about, like, in the past recent years, and especially back then, it was like mental health on reservation, like on the res, was like, "Oh, you're a little girl. Like you have a mental health issue, means you're mentally weak." And so not knowing how to deal with those things pushed me to anger, and I think that also pushed me to, like, addiction with alcohol, because that's another thing that's just really just popular on the reservation, at least mine, and I feel like that's a lot of reservations and a lot of Native communities, and a lot of, like, just communities that have been oppressed by colonization, and I think that pushed me to those places. I had homies, but, like, I feel like I wasn't that cool to hang out with because just always being angry and just mad at the world that I'm not able to accept certain mental health things, and not I don't know how to express that I'm going through mental health things. So I think high school years was difficult. For that, like, middle school and stuff, I was probably a little bit more fun because I didn't wasn't having to deal with all those things at that point yet. But sports, I was constantly, like, having a ball in my hand, basketball, football, whatever it was, and just running around. Because I moved to the res at 8 years old or 9 years old, and which is, like, a super impressionable age, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you see, like, older guys doing things, you're gonna do it that way. And I think there was a lot of misinformation given to the older guys that I was following. So trying to follow in those footsteps at a year early age, just wanting to be like older, being an adult at 14, when it's like not really understanding like fucking being an adult is hard. Having to pay rent, having to have a full-time job, having to worry about your food, all that stuff is insane. We had a strong group of friends out here on the res that we it was just constantly playing, constantly doing this, constantly being at each other's houses. So, yeah, growing up, I think sports was my main thing. If it wasn't
Mhm.
sports, I wasn't there. But then I got into high school, and if it wasn't partying, I wasn't there. And I still played sports, but I think partying took more the higher rank in what things I wanted to do. And I think us as indigenous people, and I even push this to like other communities that have suffered from colonization and the patriarchy, I think we should stay away from alcohol. That's the last thing for the colonizer to colonize, and that's the last thing they can't colonize is our spirit, because
Mm.
that's the last thing that connects us directly to our ancestors, directly to the prayers that they're giving to us. You know what I mean? And thing that they call alcohol spirits, right? Because it attacks your spirit. Um, and I think we should stay away from those things because it's already affected our communities. It's just crazy how much alcohol has impacted our communities. I just push for us to stay away from alcohol. Push us to stay away from breweries, any type of bars, anything that is surrounded around alcohol. I encourage us to stay away from because that's the last thing they can't colonize is our spirit, and alcohol attacks our spirit.
You probably have a poem on that.
I have a couple ones directed towards alcohol, but I might have to get another one going.
When did that happen in terms of knowing the gift of putting a pen to paper, writing, and how has that helped you and healed you on this journey?
So in right out of high school, I had some friends. We started a little rap group. It
What
was
was the
it
name of the
was
rap group?
it was called Woodlum Hoodlums,
Winlam
or
Hoodlums.
Woodland or Woodlum, like just like because we're from the woods
Yeah.
and because we're hoodlums. And we released 0 songs, but we all just hung out and partied together and tried to work on music. So that's when that started. Actually, realistically, it started back in like fifth or sixth grade because I remember trying to put in tapes, VHS tapes,
Mhm.
into the cassette player and trying to record, but not realizing it was only recording what was on the other tape. It wasn't recording my voice. So it goes back to that, like fourth or fifth grade, trying to write stuff, and probably none of it even rhymed, probably none of it even made sense. But yeah, just I don't even remember like who was the person to, because I like to ask this question to artists too. And I don't even remember if it was anybody specifically. I just think I was just so into music my whole life that I just was like, I want to do that. And then found some other friends that was like, yeah, let's try it. And then we kind of tried it. Would do some here and there, then stop for a year, then come back and then do some. And then when I moved to Santa Cruz, there was a portion of time where I didn't know anybody, didn't have any friends, was afraid because it was my first time living off the res to like go out and explore. So I would sit in my house. I lived with my homie from my hometown, and he would let me use his computer in GarageBand. So I would just go onto YouTube and take beats and stuff and then just write and record it. Back then, I wasn't like the poetry kind of the style that I just gave to you in the beginning. I was just trying to different styles, rapping like not even on the beat, just like super just off tone and just not great. And then one like I started practicing more and then finally found my style, my rhythm of like cadence and the
Yeah, anything that we want to cultivate, I think requires that, and that's practice.
and that's the same with interviewing people too. Like in the
Mhm.
beginning I asked the questions that I had written down. But as I go along, I found ways to incorporate other questions. Like you just did that. You brought up something I brought up in the beginning of the conversation, like learning how to do things like backtracking to other things. Like you said, it all comes with practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I'm curious about you in wanting to start your podcast.
So at that time, it was, I'm going to go right a little bit ahead of when I started the podcast because it all leads into that. So COVID had hit, right? And I just barely started getting sober, just in the house, not even knowing what to do. Just like, oh my god, I'm going crazy. I can't leave the house. Like, if we do, we gotta have a mask everywhere we go, which I was totally fine with, but, like, my mental health wasn't great. And then, unfortunately, the thing with George Floyd happened, and everywhere in the United States, we were marching, we were protesting, and I had gone to my first protest, and just being out there because at the time, I had no Native community, marching with people, feeling the pain, feeling that sense of community. I really just wanted to do more, and that one day wasn't enough. So I reached out to some folks and shout out to Isaac from Simply a Service, they're called. And they, at the time, were doing kind of security for the protests around California. And we would go and make sure that people were having peaceful protests. If any infiltrators came in, we would kind of have to deal with them or de escalate the situation. And that was beautiful because being obviously what we're protesting against and for is unfortunate situations, but to see the power of the people to be in that is amazing. And that was going on, and at the time protests like kind of slowed down and stopped being as much. So as a team, we were like, what are we going to do next? And we really wanted like there was an unhoused community in Santa Cruz that was dealing with a lot of sweeps, a lot of just straight up being brutalized by the Santa Cruz Police Department. So you know what, we're gonna go help the unhoused community. So we started getting clothing donations, food donations. I would
Mm.
cook some meals out of my house for like enough for 100 people, and
Wow.
we would just go out and pass out on the streets and just in the encampments. We would set up, have a day where we would tell everybody in the encampment we're coming back next Thursday or next Friday. Come get clothes, food. We had like toothbrushes and stuff like that, like the hygiene products, all that type of stuff. And I was just trying to do too much. I was trying to help too many people. I was trying to, you know, like from work, I'll go down and take a certain person just one pair of shoes, and trying to go and find that person in the encampment or whatever it may be was too much. And then also there was some people that would really take advantage of the situation that we're giving them, and they would get mad at us because we don't have this or we don't have that. And I was getting upset because I couldn't get those things to those people. So I had to say, you know what? My mental health is kind of getting messed up. I'm seeing drugs in front of me every single day. I just didn't want to have a situation where I relapsed or just because trying to help people. So I said, you know what, I have to take a second to figure out what I'm going to do and how I want to move forward. So I still want to help people. I still want to be, in community. I still want to do these things, but being full time in the streets is a lot because I was also working 40 hours a week at a full time job. So my 2 days off, I'd be out there in the streets helping the unhoused community.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I was tired. I was run down. I was ready for some rest, and also being newly like sober, I was pushing away like my urges to drink by trying to be in those communities. But at the same time, it was kind of hurting me because those communities were drugging it and drinking it. So it was a tough like situation to be in.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting there one day like, man, I listen to podcasts like every day.
Mhm.
And the only podcasts I listen to are like fucking white men. Uh, like, is there any like podcasts out? And there definitely was. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, like these are cool. I like the names. I like all that. I'm gonna like start my podcast. Reached out to my cousin and was like, yo, do you want to like try this with me? Like let's try it. And he was like, no,
Yeah.
like I don't think I'm good. Like I'm the person. And shout out to Elliot because my cousin Elliot has sent me so many different people to interview. Majority of the people that I've interviewed, especially in the beginning, came from him. And he was like, "No, I'm just not good, but I'm gonna send you a couple people I know." And
Mm.
then eventually, I just was like, "All right, you know what? I'm not even gonna reach out to these people. I'm just gonna interview myself and ask, like, kind of just like ask myself questions that like non-natives frequently ask me." So I just like posted that up, and then after that, like people were like, "Oh, I'm down. I want to do it." And then at first, the name was really talking, and then I was gonna have that translated into Pomo.
Mhm.
And then I was sitting back and watching. I think it was Smoke Signals, but I could be wrong. I know it was a native movie,
Yeah,
and somebody
it
had
was smoke signals because I watched a little clip of you being interviewed in 2022, and it was smoke signals.
okay, yeah, and I remember someone wearing a shirt that said Wagon Burner, and I was like, "There's the name right there. I'm gonna switch it, Burn the Wagon," and then hit up my homie for a logo, and he was like, "I got you." And then like everything started just go. It was perfect. And I feel that the timing of me naming it and switching the name and everything was just like everything happened how it was supposed to happen.
Yes. I was gonna just say, don't you think that's so beautiful when you just feel it in your bones, like, "Yep, this is it." And, because that happened to me. I was trying to find a name, and I remember exactly where I was when I remembered naming this podcast, and I felt it. I got chills. I'm like, "This is it." Yeah. So
That's
it's
tight.
beautiful. It's beautiful when that happens. I feel like when we're in a good place and we're clear and we're open to receive, spirit brings that to us and we just got to receive it. And
Yeah,
the thing
and
too is we can't be afraid.
no, and I was completely afraid to put that video out. And then once I put it out, I put it on Facebook and I got some hate from an elder that used to live next door to me.
Mhm.
And she's like, "You're not from this tribe. You shouldn't be speaking about these things. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that." And it hella hurt my feelings. Like I was like, "Man, like why she gotta say all that? Like she can just write me and say like all this stuff." But like she put it in the comments and everyone's seeing it. And even in the video, I say I'm adopted and just say that I'm trying to learn. And she was hating on me for that. And then I was sitting there just like letting myself feel it, letting myself like feel the feelings that I was feeling of, man, that kind of bummed me out. And then I was gonna go comment back, like, hey, would you be willing to have a conversation about it, like on the podcast? And then there's like 75 comments in support of me. It was
Mm.
within like 2 hours, and I was like, okay,
Oh,
like I was like, okay, like
yeah.
you know, f her and her opinions. And there, I still have people that like to say stuff like that to me, but I also have elders that ask me to do certain spiritual dances. I have elders that ask me every time there is ceremony to come dance, to make sure I bring my regalia, make sure I bring everything. And there's elders that take me to travel to all over the place to dance. And there's elders that teach me songs and tell me that it's time for me to learn songs. So yeah, I think it really it did suck, but at the same time, having those elders come up and say those things to me and like having reading all those comments, like every once in a while I'll go back and see the support.
So tell us about this. I mean, because this is connected to your podcast. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So I recently had a live show at the Oakland Museum, which was an amazing opportunity because the Oakland Museum is known worldwide. So, and this is my second show over there actually, and I hope to have another one. Live shows is definitely where I want to be, is the direction where I want to go because, and just think about how many like residents might want to do this little live show and have somebody from their community highlighted
yeah.
and have dancers from there because I like to bring dancers that go. And the Pomo dances is where what I like to bring, and that's another thing too. Think about how if I went to New Mexico and how did a live in your area, and we collaborated on that, right? And I
Mm,
brought Pomo dancers. Think about how many people might not have seen Pomo dancers in your community,
right?
or
Me,
vice
for one.
versa. Yeah,
No.
and we also have someone from your guys' tribe come and dance too. So we kind of combine that and bring that together and bring those. Obviously, we're kind of the same culture, but bring those different ways of doing it together.
This is beautiful. And around the head regalia, what is that? Is it
So for the women or for the men?
for the men?
So for the men, that the piece that goes over the
Here.
face, that
Mm-hmm.
come yeah, that come that's called the flicker band. Flicker, like Flicker.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from the wings from a woodpecker.
Oh, really?
So essentially we would peel the whole feather off up until there. So it'll go like that across your face. A orange feather, black feather, and I am still learning, like, the purpose behind that, but I've also heard that it's to hide your identity, but I'm not sure. I'm still learning a lot.
Wow, that's beautiful. And so you dance with this group?
Yeah, 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 and that group is called Yuki Resistance, and they're out of Covelo, California, but we're a mixture of people from Covelo and the people from Point Arena. We're just yeah, we're a family.
How long have you been dancing?
I did it when I was a kid for, like, I think 2 or 3 years, if that, maybe, and I never had my own regalia or anything like that. I would just always use my cousins. So, I've barely been back into it for 2 years, I think, and that's why I say I'm still learning a lot. I'm definitely not someone that can hop on here and sing you a traditional song or anything like that. I can dance to it, but I'm not someone that can sing. I still like am learning a lot about the reasoning why of wearing a lot of things. There's definitely like my cousin Ayana, and there's a couple other people. My cousin Elliot, like I mentioned earlier, there are a couple other people on my res that have been in it since the day they were born. I try to go to those people when I have any questions. My other cousin, my homie Linda too, has been doing it for a long time. So if I have a question, I try to go to them, and if they don't know anything, they then go to the elders. Been back in it for 2 years, I think maybe at this
Yeah,
point.
I love it. I do. I really mean that. I remember this woman I had in I think it was my second year on the podcast. She was really encouraging us as Native people to learn a Native song from your tribe. And it's not like for you to be in display and sing it to everyone, but for you to at least know the words and sing. I think about my grandparents when I was younger. It seemed like they were always connected, and I see us now, and I see myself now. Sometimes I can tell when I need some grounding bad. I try my hardest to like meditate and pray and smudge. And sometimes I feel like I need something a little more. And usually when it's like that, I'll go home. Like I go see my dad on the res. Before COVID, I used to go sweat, and I haven't gone since then. So it's a long time since I've been in that space. I just think it's beautiful that you're doing this and you're in this learning place. And I know one day you will be singing a song for sure.
Yeah, being in ceremony like really helps, especially with sobriety. Being able to hear those songs, being able to dance and take your shoes off and feel the dirt under your feet is really important. In our ceremony house, we don't have cell phones or anything like that. So you're really taken back because there's the fire, there's the songs. It's all none of it's electric. It's all with as we call it a clapper. So it's made out of band. Most of them are made out of bamboo. You just hit it on your hands, and then makes the sound of our music. So it really takes you back to a time that you don't have your cell phone, you don't have any of that. Like, and sometimes when I'm out and I'm dancing, I really feel as if only I exist in that moment in time with the songs and everything. Obviously, I can kind of feel the dancers around me, but sometimes the people that's sitting watching us, they kind of disappear, and all exists is me and my prayers and whatever I'm manifesting or whoever I'm manifesting for. Because I'm not just manifesting for myself; I'm manifesting for my family. Because a lot of my family practices Christianity, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But I also think it's not our culture. It's not who we are. It's not where we come from. I think praying for my family to come back to those traditions, praying for us to see the ways that aren't pushed on us by the capitalistic colonized people. And I think that's important for us is getting back to those ceremonies of
Yeah.
prayer, of being connected to earth.
This point in your life and the journey, you're probably in the summer season. I'm in the fall season. For sure, I'm in the fall season. But being in the summer season that you are in now, what have you learned about yourself?
That's a good question. I've learned that I'm softer than I thought. I'm more, I do have feelings. And I think I kind of suppressed them for a really long time. And I'm trying to learn other things other than anger. And I feel like I've 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 been imagining these things to happen to me for a really long time. I was just afraid to express them. And I'm still just learning so much because I'm only in year 4 of sobriety. And I was kind of on a partying path for 10 plus years of my life. I started really early, and it's been hard because trying to unlearn a lot of toxic masculinity and toxic ways is really, really hard. Because I grew up with a lot of thinking a lot of toxic relationships were what relationships are. So having to learn those things about myself, yeah, just being in and trying to have personal relationships while doing all this work is kind of it's hard, because you're trying to unlearn things but also be there for that partner. It's really, really hard to unlearn and be there, but also be vulnerable to I was wrong in that moment. How can I change? And keeping those changes going has been a learning curve. It's hard to pick one thing because so many things have popped up. I'm learning that I also love to be there for the younger cousins, love to be around them, love to because I think for myself, being a kid was not cool. Like I wanted to be like the older, like I said, I wanted to be older from a really young age. And I think that took a lot away from my childhood. Being a kid again, I think I really like that. And I think I get caught up sometimes playing with the kids because I forget that I'm 31 years old and like really trying to like get into the games or whatever, the hide and seek games and finding the craziest hiding spot so they can't find me. And I'm like, oh wait, they're like 5 and 6. Let me just find a little easier spot. I think now that I think about it is learning that I missed out on my childhood a lot is one of the main things I learned lately.
Mm. Well, I'll encourage you. I'm gonna challenge you to keep playing.
Yes.
I believe that the work you're doing through the podcasting and connecting with folks that you are helping to heal. And I appreciate you sharing your story because I would love for more men, our native men, to accept themselves, to forgive themselves, to let go. And there's nothing we can do in the past. It's gone. What we can do is what we do today and start over. I want our men to heal and our women too, our whole community. And the only reason why I'm emphasizing men, because I feel like sometimes it's harder for them to be vulnerable, to feel like it's okay to be soft. I'm so happy that you're on this journey and you're still learning. And you're absolutely right. When you have a partner and you're both learning about yourselves and trying to be intentional about understanding each other and taking care of each other while you're trying to do yourself. Like you're doing your own healing journey and then they're doing theirs and then you want to create a space to heal together.
Yeah, communication is key, and that's something I'm learning. And I'm definitely nowhere near like where I should be with communication because communication is scary, especially with a new partner because you don't want to get rejected. So many things go into it. But I think for me, also learning communication, speaking up even when it scares me and I'm afraid, and I think the person isn't going to like what I have to say or whatever it may be. I think communication is a very high up there on things we should work at on as Native men. And I truly do believe that as well. Is like Native men thinks talking about their feelings or think feelings in general we're not supposed to have. And that's insane because we're humans. We
Right.
can't, we're born with all of these things. The white man has just told us that we're only allowed to be angry. And when we're angry, that is the bad Indian. It's really important for us to come up and express ourselves and tell people when we're feeling, I don't know what this feeling is, but it's making me feel weird because they're not used to feeling like their feelings are hurt or whatever it may be because their mind goes straight to anger and not whatever, and they don't even know how to attach it to anything else. And at work right now, we're working on, it's called Ruler, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it has to do with feelings. And it's this chart where we kind of jot our feelings. One corner is blue, one corner is yellow, one corner is red, one corner is green. And we're trying to incorporate that into the schools. Because for me, that's the main thing I want to do is encourage athlete boys to not just be this masculine body that plays sports and that's it. Because that's what I thought all life was sports, and surrounded in those sports are a lot of toxic masculinity. So I want to encourage because I play basketball with all of these kids. I like to play pretty hard, and a lot of them listen to me when I tell them to do something. So when I come to the classroom and I also say like, "Hey, let's learn about our feelings. Let's do these things," they kind of like get attached to it because they are at that age where if someone to them that is cool is saying things, they're going to listen. So I try to do my best to like encourage talking about your feelings, encourage things that aren't necessarily masculine. Let's do things that aren't masculine. I like to paint my fingernails. I like to do all these things that aren't considered masculine. I want to encourage other boys to do these things too.
Yep. Yep. Yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. So we dare you all, men, we dare you all to paint your fingernails.
Absolutely. 100%.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You shared so much generously, your story and where you've arrived. What are you hoping for in the next 3 years with your podcast?
To have a show in New Mexico with you.
Oh my God, that would be amazing.
That'd be really cool. Honestly, have a show outside of California. That's like a big one. So if you know some folks out there that are wanting to do a show and have a venue for us to do a show at, I would love to do it. That's my main goal is to do more shows, especially outside of California.
Well, let's talk about that because I wouldn't know what that would look like. So we need to talk about that another time for sure. I
Absolutely.
mean that.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that. So live show, 3 years. What else? Anything else?
For people like us to be able to get paid for doing our podcast and be able to pay people to come on our podcast.
Right?
Yes. Obviously, money isn't, I'm a pretty anti-capitalism, so I try to not play into money as much as possible, but I do understand that people have lives and people have expenses, people have children, people have families that the only way to survive is unfortunately money. So I do want to be able to offer people that type of thing. I do want to up my merch game. I want to get more shirts, more like crew necks, not just shirts. I want to get jackets. I want to get sweaters. I want to up that type of stuff.
Yeah, you got a really nice sick jacket recently. I saw you sporting it. That was really
I'm
nice.
and shout out to Ink Lab cousin Alyssa up in Oregon. She came through. She did it. I just gave her the idea, and she just went crazy with it. Personally, all I wanted was the wagon on the back, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna throw all this on there. I'm gonna throw this on there. I'm gonna throw this on there." I was like, "Cool, let's do it." And I got it, and it was like, man, I'm blown away. And yeah, just to be able to create stuff like that. And the way we did it, we traded something for it. I didn't pay. We did it old school native style. She said, "Can I use this certain thing of your logo?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So yeah, we went old school with it, trade and barter. So yeah, I'm blessed to have that. They're gonna have to peel that thing off me because I've been wearing it so much.
It's beautiful. Well, what are you hoping our listeners do more of? Maybe any after action?
I want people to love themselves more. I
Mm,
know that's much easier said than done. Show yourself compassion. So you show yourself empathy, and showing yourselves these things will allow you to go and show it to others. If at all we made you feel comfortable in this conversation, if we at all made you want to connect to your ancestors, I encourage you to do that. Definitely follow Burn the Wagon on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram. But yeah, the main thing is love yourself, and that will allow you to show love to others. If you can, stay away from alcohol in spaces that are encouraging you to drink, because like I said, that is the last thing that the colonizers can't colonize is our spirit. So that is what connects us to our ancestors. Keep listening to your podcast, keep sharing your podcast, and I definitely want to bring you on my podcast. Yeah, I think direct actions. Definitely look up stories like Khadijah Britton, look up stories like Nicole Smith, look up stories like Ruby Sky, all missing and murdered Indigenous women from Northern California. Pray for Palestine, pray for our people in Congo, pray for people in Sudan, pray for people in Puerto Rico, Hawaii, wherever wagons came to colonize us. Let's verbally burn them down.
mm, thank you. Ahé'hee. I would say Navajo, Ahé'hee Sileya, which is thank you, my younger brother.
Thank you,
Mm,
Yahui. I really appreciate you bringing me on, and you're telling stories that like 100% need to be told, and they're being told from our perspective, not some white man's perspective, writing a movie, not writing a book, not no. This is untold stories by real natives and who they're from, where they're from, who they are, all of that. So keep it pushing, and yeah,
All right. I have a couple of quick questions. I like to always do real quick ones. Coffee, water, tea, or juice?
water,
Movie or books?
movie,
Favorite music genre?
reggae,
Reggae.
yeah.
Favorite artist? Okay, favorite artist.
So right now it's tribal seeds.
Tribal Seeds.
Yeah,
Last live concert you went to?
I think it was tribal seeds.
Oh, I've not heard of
Yeah.
them, so I'll check them out.
Yeah, they're a cool Mexican band from San Diego.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Morning or night?
I'm a morning person.
Favorite animal?
I'd say wolf, but also cat.
Oh. And what's one thing that most people don't know about you, particularly people in your inner circle?
Man, that's a hard one. I don't even know
Oh,
that I'm half white.
oh, okay. Food you're allergic to.
I don't have any allergies to any food.
The last time you did any form of gathering, and what was it?
It was for a funeral.
Mm.
But before
Thank
that
you.
was probably for to dance.
Mm. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything about you, your stories, your ability to inspire folks, how much you give back to the community, and how much you pray for so many of us. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. I really
Oh,
appreciate the opportunity of coming on, and I can't wait to hear your stories. And also, you have a really good radio voice as well, too. So it's very soothing and very easy to listen to.
oh, thank you. Thank you, brother. We'll
You're
talk
welcome.
soon.
All right.
Take care. Bye.